So I'm here with Graham from Segment, and I'll let him give a little intro.
Hi, I'm Graham Hunter. I'm a program manager at Segment. I manage the startup program, and I've used no code now for 5 or 6 years to put together everything from little projects to, managing the startup program at Segment. And I'm excited to talk to you all about it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'd love to talk to you about. Firstly, let's touch on the startup program and how that's sort of managed with no code. You mentioned that it was built by, is it one of the co-founders originally, the whole process, and we can dive into that a bit. But I think just briefly, I want to say that everyone points to Segment's startup program as like the epitome of a good program for startups, and it's really well done. So just want to sort of give kudos there first, and yeah, I'd love to hear a bit about behind the scenes of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kudos all goes to Ilya Volodarsky, who designed the program from scratch, as well as a lot of tireless effort from the Segment team. Um, I I have been there for about 5 months, and sort of have taken the baton from some people and on some projects, and yeah, we use a lot of no code tools, primarily Airtable
Okay.
and Zapier and Segment. At Segment, we run the startup program, and the startup program gives a lot of benefits to startups that have raised less than $5 million and have been around less than 2 years. And so the first sort of like no code bit is the application process. And so, we have a website that gives all information. And then when people are ready to apply straight from our website, there's an Airtable form that they fill out where they put in their Crunchbase information. When they submit that Crunchbase information, there's a sort of like web scraping process. That's not a no code implementation. That is, was done by a data engineer, but essentially it pulls out all the data from their Crunchbase profile, when were they founded, how much have they raised, all these things, and then pre-qualifies them. And then we manually go in and look at things. We have checkboxes that, send little Slack notifications and emails so that the right people can go and credit their account. We have all sorts of tracking in place. These Airtables also have Zaps linked up to them. For example, like when someone completes the Airtable form, in Zapier we say, okay, then fire a Segment event that says application completed. And so this is how we keep track of all of the events that are going on in our analytics funnel, and stay on top of using segment for segment.
Awesome. So do you think that you could actually, you mentioned that scraping process, there's I was going through a workshop yesterday, and we talked about that on Dash, that's a spreadsheet tool that you can implement a Crunchbase API and pull through company data that way. Even things like Parabola. I wonder if you could now do, if you were rebuilding it, I wonder if you could do the scraping part automatically too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always been, I started using Import.io probably like 7 years ago or 6 years ago or something like that. And when it was free, and built a lot of import APIs. And that was my actually introduction to no code.
Okay.
Where it's like, oh, it's just point and click. And occasionally you'd need to go inspect an element or something like that. And so I've built that. Since then, import has gone sort of like a little more in the way of Lead Genius and stuff like that. I think where it's more for bigger companies, but I'm still a really big fan of their product. But yeah, I totally think that we could do that web scraping. I also have in the past used import XML within Google Sheets in order to do some of that scraping. I have not been able to get that to work for 6 months or a year or something like that. And I just kind of feel like there's so much JavaScript and so much just like happening in the front end now that like most of the times, unless you're scraping a static HTML page, that import XML is not really like viable.
Yeah,
But
probably not.
one of those other tools seems great. I'm not familiar with Dash, but
Yeah, Dash is quite a new company. It's basically a spreadsheet database
mm-hmm.
that you can pull things into. But yeah, Parabola has a lot
I
of.
love Parabola.
Yeah, do you use it a lot?
I use it a bit. Mainly for like mapping CSV uploads into tools and things like that. I think
Yeah,
that's my main use case. I like their vision for like, it seems much less focused on sort of like technical people or even product managers or anything like that. And it seems like your computer can do awesome stuff. Why don't you like, tell
yeah,
us what you do regularly and we will automate that. And I'm just thinking about like me as a marketing manager 10 years ago, just like
yeah,
editing CSVs from AdWords and like trying to make campaign changes and just like all that stuff that could have been so much easier. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I think like to me, that's what this whole no code space is about. Is that there's that job to be done, and people are looking to just have something, a solution. It just happens to be that like all the capabilities are changing. The abstraction of how you do that is so much easier. And it's funny that you said that import.io was sort of your entry into the no code space with playing with APIs, whereas I think mine has been almost the other way around, where I started just like building a website with Webflow or Card or whatever. And then
Mm-hmm.
when you start getting into the more complex things, like now on the MakerBad site, there's profiles that have things going back and forth, which I'm actually like talking to the Webflow API and using different like webhooks and things like that. And the way I've learned more now is like you do those things and you almost step up, you upgrade every now and then. You see someone
Yeah.
else do it, and then you think, oh wait, yeah, I can do something like that. So you'll like do just a little bit more. You start working with an API, and then you start recognizing the patterns of, oh, okay, I know sort of how an API works now. I understand
Mm-hmm.
why that would connect with that, or why this would do this thing and this would do that thing. So I think it's like a really interesting path into building products, and then also like it's almost the best place to go to start learning how to code. Like doing that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, absolutely. And like you get further and further into it.
Yeah,
Where like last night I bought Alfred, a license for Alfred, and started working with Alfred Workflows.
yeah,
And it is crazy. Like you can do some simple ones that are like native to the platform, like where you just like flip on an integration. But what I did was basically I connected Alfred up to the Asana API, um, which requires like browsing a bunch of web pages where people have made workflows and put them online, and you're just like, does this seem reputable? Like, is this, do I just
yeah,
download it and like, where do I do with it after that? And you
yeah,
download Alfred, and so like your knowledge just sort of like goes forward incrementally. And from email marketing and things like that, I've used like workflow builders, and then I'd use like if this then that, and if this then that turned into more Zapier use, and then that turned into like messing around with like Integromat or Tray.io or something
yeah,
like that. And then suddenly you're just like, okay, I think I know what JSON is now. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like I get it. It's just key value pairs. Okay. Oh, and then eventually you run into the thing where something's nested too far down and you have to figure it out. And then, so, yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm anywhere close to like being able to code in terms of understanding like, like a tech stack from like the model and the view and like all these things. Um, but definitely can deal with structured data, and that's like a big first step to me when starting to get into from the beginner, which is like if this then that Google Sheets and maybe an Airtable, into the intermediate, which is more about like like maybe Zapier
yeah.
multi-step zaps and stuff like that.
Do you think that like this no code building will become one of those skills that we just see quite often as like well, there's an integration specialist over at Segment. I know what they do. They're a no-code builder. They like work on building these workflows. And if so, I guess how far out do you think we are from that world? If
I
we are.
mean, that kind of exists now. You know what I mean? Like we use Tray.io at Segment mainly for working with Salesforce and things like that. But we have all sorts of little logic flows that can be duplicated and modified. And not everybody wants you popping around in there and doing stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you're working with production data and things like that, I think that what's going to happen is that integrations will enable people to move to a self-service world where the experts provide oversight. And so, even if you look at like email marketing or push notifications, oftentimes like you don't go to the bigger and bigger a company gets. Like, I've been the first employee like 4 times, right? And I've been at a company like TurboTax or Segment, right? At a lot of these companies, when you need an email campaign sent to your little group of user research people or people who opted into this special feature, and you go to marketing, they'll say, "Great, let me know if you need any help." you know Here's the software. And so like I think that we're moving much more to a world of self-service where there are specialists in every seat, and then everyone else is a consumer of those softwares like Customer.io or MailChimp or whatever. And then they're trying to do it. And then they're like, "Hey, I just need a quick hand." And then the marketing person comes in and they're like, "Oh yeah, you got to use these templates." And they're like, "Okay, cool." And then, and then they sort of like get it and "Does this look good?" And they say, "Yeah, it looks good. Click send." And then
Yeah.
they send it out. And so that's how I think no code is going to permeate like, smaller and even eventually larger companies, is through like, it's not like there will be no code specialists. There are no code specialists, and you can hire one on whatever freelancer marketplace to do this kind of stuff. But I don't think that no code specialist will be a role. I think everyone will be expected to know no code, just like Google Sheets. No one's grilling you about your Google Sheets skills unless you're building in-depth financial models.
Yeah.
And so I think it'll be like that.
Yeah, I suppose I probably think the same. I was speaking with one of the founders of obviously.ai, and where they help people do machine learning, and it's like, well, we are taking care of the basic stuff and like the easier stuff so that you can do, if you're in machine learning or a data scientist, you actually like the expertise is almost like the top bar then. So if you're in that role, you just focus on the creative, really specific, like interesting expertise of that area rather than like filling your time with all the fluff and all the basic stuff that you have to do over and over.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
blocking and tackling that everyone else is doing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think I see no code skill being sort of an ubiquitous thing where it's just like, yeah, I know how to no code stuff. I know how to like do these things. I can connect these things together and build a tool that schedules emails based on these actions or whatever. I think that, yeah, it's funny that you say that. Well, I suppose at Segment, it may be a more unique culture that you say there's people already there who know these things and know how to do that stuff and like will repeat that. And I think obviously big customers of Trade.io and even Zapier and things like that obviously understand that. But I wonder if you think that there's like more startups these days who are using Airtable, Zapier, etc., who aren't quite there and are maybe looking for more of the generalists, and like they've got a team of maybe 20 people and they're looking for people who can do more with like multiple tools and things. I wonder if it's more against the smaller companies trying to move faster with less people, who maybe haven't bought into this whole concept yet.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest, I'll tell you that like when you look at startups that are growing from stage to stage, like you get pretty big before you find true generalists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm a program manager. Like that doesn't exist at a 50-person company. you
Yeah.
know, like barely, let alone a 15-person company. You know, to me, one of the, like, I won't call it a problem, but like one of the reasons that no code isn't implemented more at early stages is two things. First of all, like engineers are the earliest employees of startups.
Hmm.
And engineers like are in a constant sort of like build versus buy kind of like mentality. And founders also see the product that they're building as a piece of proprietary technology. And so like, you know, let's say that like, you know, Goldman comes in and they're like looking at your startup, your fintech startup, and they're just like, you know, okay, let's see what they're doing. You know, like we want to like have some early conversations about whether we want to like acquire you or acquire you or whatever, right? And then your platform is just entirely just like strung together like
Airtable Zapier.
bits of yeah, totally. They're not interested in that. They're interested in buying proprietary technology. And that encourages founders and engineers to go the route of building it custom. Um, and I think sometimes incorrectly, you know, but you know,
Yeah.
who the heck am I, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of times like the path towards product market fit is hard enough, and that like adopting these technologies and then finding the product market fit and then retrospectively building, you know, building the product that you would have been using the whole time to replace some of that so that you can customize it and make it proprietary is like a lot of times how a lot of companies should work. I'm sure there are exceptions around like, you know, social networks and things like that. You're not going to go launch a social network on some sort of like WordPress template necessarily. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, yeah, what kind of companies do you think would benefit the most out of no code then? Do you think it is actually probably not the tech startup types that are more inclined to be getting the benefit out of having their team taught about no code and implementing these things? Or
Yeah, I see no code as like the so you know, you're familiar with like agile and waterfall and like, you know, like all these things, right? And there's all these big companies that are going through like digital transformations that are trying to um like move more towards faster execution, and but they don't really know how, right? Like
yeah,
their
yeah,
organization is like big and slow, and right. And so like I think that no code is like best for those internal programs at companies. So no big company is going to use no code for a customer facing thing unless it's like sexy, you know. Like no, they don't want people to be filling out Airtable forms, you know. And Airtable doesn't provide you enough customization in the forms to like even ever get it to the point where some brand is going to like, you know, some sort of Nike is going to like, you know,
yeah,
have people fill that out, maybe in a customer service situation, like I don't know.
yeah,
But for those companies internally, I think that these tools can help push people towards executing faster, and also, you know, like just speed of execution, um, or speed of, you know, like getting through execution to an outcome, and then showing that outcome to people and being like, we should build it, you know, essentially doing the same thing that entrepreneurs do, you know, with MVP, but internally at bigger companies. That's where I think like no code is most like useful. And that's the case in which I would imagine that a no codes person who's a specialist could like work it into it. And
yeah,
anybody dealing with no code anything is like coming to this person because they have, you know, tens of thousands of employees.
yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I've not like had conversations with many people who, or anyone really, who've like talked these through at different company stages and where they think. So it's been, yeah, that's a nice take on it. So let's talk about some of the
Thanks.
smaller projects that you've worked on. Then you want to talk us through some of those and what you've
Yeah,
done?
great. Yeah, I mean, these things are, I just started publishing on Airtable Universe and love it. And
Yeah,
am very much like obsessed with like making it usable by other people, just because I'm like, I've built these things so much. I'll build like little financial models, and then it'll, that project will just drift into the background, and then I put all this work into it and it's not useful.
Yeah.
So now I'm like polishing these things off and putting them on Airtable Universe. Number one, I'm helping to plan my sister's wedding, and you wouldn't believe the like intricacies of like, okay, there are people who are allowed an anonymous +1, and there are people who are not, and there are people who are there with their partner, and some are bringing kids. We also have housing accommodations, and groups are being paired together to stay in rooms, and you're just like, okay, we've got a people table, okay, we've got a groups table, we've got and then just like the amount of complexity is just insane.
I'm getting married in June, so I definitely know the complexities. And well, yeah, June TBC. Yeah, we've definitely all of those things. I'm thinking, yeah. So yeah.
Are you doing it in Airtable? How are you doing it?
No, we use with Joy, which is just a spreadsheet, basically.
Yeah.
Just has there.
It's like a service meant for wedding planning, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to build like a Glide app and then have Airtable link everything together, but then I realized that actually I'd be more involved in the actual details. So I thought, if I let my fiance use Joy and she can manage it all. Yeah, exactly. So
I love that. So in addition to that, like one of the ones that I built recently that I'm most proud of is my girlfriend and I were looking for a new apartment. And in the Bay Area, this is before Corona or anything like that, right? And so in the Bay Area, it's like a race, you know what I mean? Like you can find reasonably priced things. Oh yeah, it doesn't have a yard, but it's got this, it's got, and so it's like everything just falls in the middle, right? Where you're like, oh, I'm compromising so much, but there are good places out there if you're the first one to them, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm on Craigslist all the time, just like, no, hide, like things like that. And so I built a Airtable that has a Kanban board for our application process that uses the Airtable web clipper to scrape every piece of a Craigslist page. And so when I'm browsing Craigslist and I'm like, oh, that seems cool, I just click the web clipper, add it, it pulls in all the information, the rent, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms. Some of it's parsed with formulas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the content of the page, the email, the phone number, all these things. And if it's a phone number, then, going to SMS through blocks, I think. And then if it's an email address, automatically sending an email address immediately. That's a pretty long, like you want to keep these things short, I know, but I think people are screening applicants, like regardless of what fair housing says, like, and so it's like me, and I was like, it was so wonderful to see you're posting, my girlfriend and I, Susanna, it's just like a little flowery, like links to our LinkedIn profiles, just like things like that, and we get really great response rates, people like wanting to schedule times with us. I'm using Calendly in the invite, and then there's a Calendly to Airtable Zapier integration that moves them to the next stage once they've scheduled.
I love that.
As well as like a follow-up email if they haven't, right? So emails out, follow-up emails, Calendly for booking showings, and then moving the stages along. Like basically the Kanban view looks like Craigslist. Here are all the houses, big pictures that like, oh yeah, that place. Oh yeah, I want to, and so that's really something that I enjoyed building. And now I'm doing the same thing. I'm building something for like, sort of like Craigslist furniture hunting.
Yeah, I bet you could do a base for a lot of Craigslist things, like unbundling Craigslist in Airtable and just like doing for each.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I need to I'll have to follow you on it on the universe and take a look at some of these bases, because I think
for sure
pulling them apart and doing some tutorials or workshops or something on that would be awesome. I think, yeah, we should definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like the faster you find a place, it's just so much work keeping track of it. I run a community house now, and you wouldn't believe the number of applicants who I say, hey, we'd like to schedule a time to talk to you. And they say, sorry, which house is this? I'm just like, I have no idea what like I'm doing or what, who, everyone's just texting me. I say, sure, Thursday. And
Yeah,
what's the
yeah.
address? You know, it's just keeping track of it so hard, and being on top of it is the difference between you getting an amazing apartment and not.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I love that. Are your projects mostly around, like, mostly Airtable focused then at the moment?
Yeah, you know, I've looked at Glide and things like that, and it seems really cool. I think it seems a little like maybe some of my other projects might be like good for it. But most of the things, I'm the only user of my product, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? And so like Glide seems like if you have a group of people, like a wedding, you know,
yeah,
that where there are all other people like, you know, contributing information and things like that, that would be like better. I have used Boundless a lot, and I love Boundless.
yeah,
In my last role at the head of marketing at Visor, basically, Visor helps people to optimize their withholdings. And so, you know, a lot of people get a tax refund at the end of the year in the US. And that's basically a loan that you gave to the government interest free. You should ideally get nothing and owe nothing, right? And so Visor helps you to like hit that. And so their application process where you like apply to talk to a, you know, a CPA and or do it through the app and upload certain documents and things like that. You know, we have a pre-application process, and that was all in Boundless with Segment and Google Tag Manager events that are tied to like paid acquisition, how far people got in the funnel relative to, so it's like, oh, how much are we paying for a person who is pre-qualified, or how much are, you know, things like that. And I really liked using Boundless for that, which I think is just kind of like Glide, but more for the web than mobile. Is that accurate? Glide is primarily like mobile web.
I think it's more for just web. I
Okay.
mean, her partner, and that's what we initially saw was like it's sort of like Bubble, the different user
Mm-hmm.
interface, but like still very powerful.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, but most of my stuff is just for myself, and so I use generally Airtable and Airtable blocks and Zapier, and you know some other light tools. Alfred, you know, I have my personal productivity workflow that I'm always optimizing. I think the number one thing there that is going to change my life is like the ability to write down a task quickly. And so my Alfred, when I press Command Space, sends things into Asana. And so I push A space and then like just a task reminder and then enter, and it's gone and it's in my Asana and I'm back to whatever I was doing. And
Yeah.
so that's the difference between me writing it down and just not, and being like, oh my God, I never followed up with Ben.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hey Ben, so sorry for the delay. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then you're off to the races, you know, like,
yeah, for sure.
cool.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I really appreciate you running us through some of the stuff you do at Segment and personal projects. They sound like they're more in the advanced skills type of thing, but I think, yeah, once people get into them, people can really level up quickly in this whole space. So I really appreciate your time, and yeah, we can wrap it up there and let the people know where they can sort of follow you and follow your stuff and see some of your projects.
Sure. Yeah, I think that Twitter is just the best. It's at Marketer Graham on Twitter, Graham. And I'll send a link to my Airtable Universe profile, and you know, we'll just go from there.
Awesome. Sounds great. Cheers for that.
Sweet.
Speak to
Thanks
you
so much, Ben.
soon.